Good morning, everybody. I'll request all of you to kindly put your mobile in the silent mode. We are starting this two-day conference from today, a conference on South Asia manuscript traditions and mathematical contributions. Mathematics is a very, very fascinating subject. I myself has been a student of mathematics, and whatever I could achieve in my life is all because of mathematics. This two-day conference is basically going to shed light on the rich and diverse traditions of South Asia, particularly India, which has preserved knowledge through a variety of media and practices. And these are, broadly speaking, oral traditions. The Shruti and Smriti thing we should recall in that connection. Epigraphy and manuscripts. Many of you may be aware that India International Center is implementing a very ambitious project called Samhita. Under this project, we are trying to document all the manuscripts that have gone outside the country and bring them on a digital platform with all the metadata provided, so that this knowledge becomes accessible to all the scholars who are interested in the subject. We have already done one pilot phase, and second phase is under implementation, and we are supported by Ministry of External Affairs in this endeavor. And our colleague Dr. Sudha Gopalakrishnan, who is the Executive Director of our International Research Division, is also spearheading this project as its director. Under the aegis of Samhita, we have organized this conference. I would like to mention that the person who has really motivated us to organize this conference is none other than our President IISc, Ambassador Shyam Saran. He is present here, and he's also kindly agreed to chair the inaugural session. I extend a very warm welcome to you, sir.
Thank you.
Friends, we are very fortunate that many well-known names in the field of mathematics have responded to our invitation, and they are here. We have Professor Manjul Bhargava, famous professor of mathematics in Princeton University. He has traveled all the way from US and to be with us here. I extend a very warm welcome to Professor Bhargava. Professor Rama Subramaniam is another very eminent person. He is with IIT Bombay, and he is a professor of mathematics at the Center for Traditional Indian Knowledge Systems and Skills. I welcome to you, Professor Rama Subramaniam. Ladies and gentlemen, I am sure all of you are going to really enjoy and really benefit from this two-day conference. We have also organized one exhibition on this theme in our gallery just upstairs. Today, our External Affairs Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, was expected to be with us in the inaugural session itself, but because of his busy engagement, he said that he will not come, but he has kindly agreed to inaugurate the exhibition for which he will be coming in the evening today. On this particular subject, let me also say that mathematics is something which has been, I would say, inherent to the Indians. Many ancient Indians have made monumental contribution in mathematics. In this direction, I would like to recall the contribution made by Aryabhatta in the 5th century. He is the one who gave us the concept of zero and decimals, and they are the foundation of mathematics. Other important names which I would like to recall on this occasion is Brahmagupta, Bhaskara II, Madhav Sangam Grama, the founder of Kerala Society of Mathematics, then Nilakanta Somayaji, Srinivas Ramanujam, Harish Chandra, C.R. Rao, and in that series, Professor Manjul Bhargava. Friends, we have got very interesting sessions organized in this two-day conference, and I'm sure all of you are really going to benefit immensely. We are also trying to get the students, the young students, because they are the ones who are really going to take this very rich tradition of India forward. And as you all know, for any country to develop, for the stream of STEM, that is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, have to really be pursued very seriously by the younger generation. And therefore, without saying much on the importance of mathematics in the overall development of the country, I would only say that it is time that our youngsters and all of us should really learn what our ancient people have contributed. And this two-day conference is going to elaborate in greater details. So we all look forward to very, very fruitful business sessions. We have got eminent mathematicians of our country who have been drawn from various educational institutions and universities. They are all here. Professor Srinivasan is amidst us here today. He will be delivering the valedictory address on the second day. So with these, once again, I extend a very warm welcome to all of you. Thank you very much. And I now request our President, Ambassador Shyam Saran, to take the proceedings forward.
Who will speak first? Sorry, go ahead.
I would like to invite Dr. Sudha Gopalakrishnan. She is going to present the outline of this conference. Sudha, please.
Ambassador Shyam Saran, President, India International Center, Mr. K.N. Srivastava, Director, IIC, Professor Ramasubramanian, Historian of Science, Mathematics and Astronomy, the convener of this conference, Professor Manjul Bhargav, pioneering mathematician and keynote speaker for the conference, the galaxy of mathematicians and historians of mathematics who are here for the two-day conference on South Asia's manuscript traditions and mathematical contributions, other specialists on mathematics who are assembled here today, and guests. It is indeed a special occasion for the India International Center today. The next 2 days, an exceptional meeting of scholars dedicated to the field of mathematics is unfolding in front of us. In the panel of presentations over the next 3 days, there are experts specialized in multiple domains pertaining to mathematics, scholars representing the study of the history of mathematics, of landmark texts and manuscripts, of course, commentaries and translations of key texts. Some of them work also cross-culturally by exploring historical connections between South Asia and other regions, by exploring other studies in mathematics ranging from astronomy, the field of astronomy, architecture, medicine, to music, and also impinging on areas that we broadly call as the arts. Architecture I mentioned already, sculpture, even dance, every aspect has mathematics in it. So some of these areas will be, I think, more closely analyzed in the coming 2 days. I would take a couple of minutes here to introduce Samhita, South Asian Manuscript Histories and Textual Archive, which is started by the India International Center in 2022, which provides the context for significant gatherings like this one. In 2022, we started Samhita, which integrates a relational database of manuscripts and digital archive of texts, focusing specifically on manuscripts that have gone out of India, like the director had said, and South Asia to other far-flung repositories in the USA, UK, Europe, and countries in the West, South, and also, importantly, South and Southeast Asia. So all these places we found that there are many repositories of manuscripts which are housed in libraries, archives, even individual collections. So this is an attempt to bring together under this platform and make it universally accessible through open source technologies. To look at the vastness and the spread of texts and manuscripts in South Asian region, and to understand their diversity and interconnections, we had to look at countries like, specifically at countries like Nepal, Bhutan, and Sri Lanka, and also beyond, like Indonesia and Japan, where these traditions are forged in very close cultural exchange. Our funding from the Ministry of External Affairs facilitated this program, and in the first phase that we did in the last 2 years, we began with a survey and digitization of manuscripts from select institutions such as Aksheshwara Mahavihara in Nepal, Wellcome Institute in the UK, the University of Copenhagen in Denmark, Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris, to name a few. In the second phase, we are spreading and extending our exploration to the UPenn, the University of Pennsylvania collection in the US, the British Library, which has very vast number of manuscripts, Tokyo University, which has very significant manuscripts, Sanskrit manuscripts, and also several Buddhist manuscripts naturally, and also other institutional collections in Nepal, Bhutan, and Sri Lanka. With the realization that digitizing and collecting texts and making them globally accessible is only part of the task, Samhita organizes public-facing activities such as lectures by experts in different areas of manuscript histories, workshops and masterclasses, and exhibitions and conferences on specialized topics. We are in the process of compiling them into volumes and also hosting most of them into the website. In this context, Samhita is an ongoing effort. As in any program with multiple partners, there are immense benefits and some challenges. We hope to continue this exciting journey with the support of all of you. In today's context, I gratefully acknowledge for this conference and the exhibition, acknowledge the collaboration of each of the panelists here, the enthusiastic collaboration of Professor Ramasubramanian and his team, the generous contribution from the Samskriti Institution of Melkote under Professor M.A. Alvar and his team, and Professor Chandrasekhar, the Persian scholar who has also contributed many manuscripts and also given us good guidance on cross-cultural exchange, and also coming to closer home. But before that, Mr. Aniket, the young scholar, Aniket Kabir, the young scholar who has been unceasingly supporting us, both with his ideas and also inputs and in every field, the untiring work of my colleagues at the IIC and the International Research Division. I join Mr. Srivastav in warmly welcoming once again the delegates of this 2-day conference, and also everyone here who are attending these 2 events, the exhibition and the conference. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sudhaji. It is a privilege to introduce Professor Ramasubramanian, Professor in charge of the Center for Traditional Indian Knowledge Systems and Skills at IIT Bombay. He's a renowned scholar in the history of Indian sciences, mathematics, and astronomy. With his expertise in Sanskrit, Vedic teachings, and Indian philosophy, he inspires students and scholars through teachings blending science, Sanskrit, and spirituality. His contributions include detailed explanatory notes on Ganita Yukti Bhasha, Tantra Sangraha, and Karana Paddhati, which reveal the Kerala school's contributions to mathematics and astronomy. His erudition earned him the coveted title of Vidvat Pravara from Sringeri Sharada Peetham and the prestigious Maharshi Badarayan Vyas Samman from the President of India. He served as an elected council member of the International Union of the History and Philosophy of Science and Technology for 2 terms, is a fellow of the Indian National Science Academy, and was an invited speaker at the International Congress of Mathematicians in 2022. He's also the editor-in-chief of the Indian Journal of History of Science. So.
My humble pronouns to all those who have assembled here. And I am so delighted to be a part of this event. And as was mentioned earlier, perhaps this was the vision of President Shyam Charan ji. So there was a meeting invited to discuss this a couple of months ago. And then I was so thrilled to know the kind of activities that are happening here. With this, I thought of paraphrasing this event in the form of a verse, so I will just start with that. Shyamoyam nipunah kriti parishadapyesha gunagrahini loke harija bharatiya charitam khyane cha dakshavayam vastveikaikamapih vanchita phala prapteh padam kim punaha madbhagyopachayadayam samuditaha sarvo gunanam ganaha. Shyamoyam, I just mean the president, so it was mentioned. Nipunah kriti means very good in organization. And of course, his credentials all of us know. And this assembly is an assembly of great scholars. So we have, starting with Professor Manjul Bhargava, Professor Srinivas, Professor Sriram Clemency, and of course a host of other scholars. And of course, what is going to be done in this conference, the outline is essentially there are 4 parts of this conference. One is this kind of academic talks that we will have by great scholars. The other is the exhibition that is going to be inaugurated, where you will have the view of a panorama of beautiful manuscripts which have been transmitted to us over generations, over thousands of years. And that is the second part. We will have an appreciation of how the knowledge got transmitted besides the oral tradition. So that is the second part. And of course, we will have a scintillating performance in the evening, the music session. And the fourth thing which you might not have read in the brochures is book release. So there are 2 books which will be released. One primarily by my mentor, Professor Sriram. So he has written a brilliant commentary in English with mathematical notes on Siddhanta Shiromani. The other is, along with the privilege of my own students, so we edited a book on Leelavati, a beautiful commentary. So that also will be released, and in the evening this will happen. This is the other part which will happen. And these are the 4 things. Basically, why are we doing all this? It is primarily what we have to do for what we call as Rishi Rina, the sages who have transmitted the wisdom to us, in order to recollect that, and the kind of painstaking work they have done in trying to transmit these through manuscripts. See? So oral tradition is of course very important, but then that is the other part which we are going to do. And all these events have beautifully, so we have converged here. Vastvekaikamapiha. The ultimate idea is to share the wisdom and the beauty of the Indian tradition. Vanchita phala prapteh padam kim punaha. So no bhagyopachayad, we can say naha bhagyopachayad. Samuditaha sarvo gunanam ganaha. Okay. That said, I also wanted to, today suddenly at 7 o'clock in the morning as I woke up, so then some thought came to my mind that I should just share the indebtedness that we have to, I'm not trying to eulogize anybody, but I was really impressed with the kind of contribution that Manjul, my friend, has been, Professor Manjul Bhargava has been doing over the past few years. So it just occurred to me, I just wrote a couple of verses, with that I will wind up. Gauss ityakhya budhasya, Gauss, the famous mathematician. Gauss ityakhya budhasya bhavanagatam is basically the law of composition. Okay? Sutram punaha cubike. So it was quadratic, he extended it to cubic. Quarticadishu. Okay, this is basically, you can read this, all this in the web. Quarticadishu chitrame tadanayat. Chitram is something which is amazing that he extended. Because of that, labdha pratishtha sudhi. He got himself established as an outstanding algebraic mathematician. Prapta khyatihi. Okay. Prapta khyati starts with, so soon after he completed with Andrew Wiles in 2001 his PhD, he was immediately posted in Princeton as a professor, and within a couple of years he became full professor, full tenure professor at the age of 29. Okay, that is amazing. Prapta khyati-rayam, this is one aspect. But astikavaraha, see, that is what is most important thing. So many people, the moment they gain some kind of a credential, they just think that they are descending from Mars. Astikavaraha Princeton iti khyapitam vidyasthanam anupravishya tadanu sviyam kritim vardhayan. Kritim vardhayan means, what I meant is, it is not that he stopped. So his productive activity has been really remarkable over several decades, a couple of decades we know. In fact, I must tell you that recently there was an occasion where one of the other famous mathematicians from India, I will not tell the name here, so that mathematician I met and I was discussing, so she was telling, oh, I should not have said she. So that mathematician was telling me that I don't understand why Manjul is spending all the time here dealing with all this bureaucracy and then NEP policy. Even if he spends 2 months, I mean, he is able to come up with a brilliant paper. So he should do that, is what she was saying. So what I meant is, so this is something which is remarkable of him. This is what I meant. That is the reason which prompted me to come up with this. Fields ityakhyam upadhimapya. Okay, Fields 2014 Fields Medal. Fields ityakhyam upadhimapya sabudhaha deshasya yad gauravam. Okay, that is the most important thing, that the scientific and rich scientific heritage of our nation should be brought. So that is why he is engaging with all this, writing this few articles for the book, revising the whole book and so on in the NEP curriculum. Yad gauravam tasyagre sarane. Okay, he wanted to just ensure that it is taken forward and communicated to the younger generation. Avapta dhishanaha. So he got himself closely connected with that idea, and dattavadhano bhavat. I don't have time to explain all this. Sviyam shodhakritim. That is the other aspect. Sviyam shodhakritim yo dvijavaraha. Okay. Sviyam shodhakritim. His own research, he set it secondary. Svi gaunim. Okay, that is secondary, is the phrase in English, Sanskrit we use. Sviyam shodhakritim cha yo dvijavaraha. Gaunim muda bhavayat tasmai manjula bhargavaya sudhiye suswagatam tanmahe. So with this I conclude. So I was given 10 minutes, so I have 2 more minutes. Okay. So basically this conference, so as it was shared, so it was to make people aware of the kind of dedication with which scholars have been copying manuscripts. This is not an easy job at all. So oral tradition has been there for hundreds of years, but then that was not sufficient, and therefore people felt once there was a medium. The medium was created by people. We have manuscripts which are in palm leaf, we have manuscripts which are in birch bark, we have manuscripts which are in paper. But doing something in the palm leaf is something which is extraordinary. Before paper came, so they had to do one correction if it were to be done. Of course, somebody will be asked to scribe, but then you may have to correct. The scholar has to further see it, and you will find various kinds of marginal corrections. And the most difficult thing is preserving, and we have not paid enough attention, is what I would say, in trying to do that. And I'm very, very happy that Dr. Sudha Gopalakrishnan, who is the prime mover behind this event, so she was the first director of even National Manuscript Mission, and she has taken enormous efforts in trying to push this forward with her own team. So this is also remarkable. So our idea is to just ensure that these manuscripts are made available for the public, and of course various agencies are also working towards that, but we need more and more people who can commit to themselves for this purpose, and the exhibition is primarily for you to have a feel for the kind of effort that have gone over centuries in trying to present it as beautifully as possible. See, that is another thing. And you may also get a feel for, so we have Niharika, so who has been working behind the screen, so all the time. And so there you will see the efforts that have gone in trying to collate them and present it to us in the form of a beautiful exhibition, which will be inaugurated in the evening by the minister. I would invite all of you to kindly participate in all the events. Thank you. Namaste.
That was brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your kind words and for introducing our mathematical heritage, manuscript legacies, and our distinguished speaker in a way nobody else could. May I request our Chair, President Shri Shyam Saran, President ISC, for his inaugural remarks.
Thank you. I can't render my speech in Sanskrit, so please forgive me. There is really not much to say after all that you have heard from the previous speakers, but I would like to add my words of thanks. First of all, to our director, Shivastav, who has been a pillar of support for not only this project, but for other projects as well. And while he has said that his life has been based on mathematics and he has a love of mathematics, I am exactly on the opposite side of the spectrum. This was not my favorite subject, but yet I survived, though he flourished. Let me also give my very grateful thanks to Sudha. Sudha and I go back some time, because this whole idea of the Samhita actually began sometime in 2015 when I was in a different capacity. She was already leading Sahapedia, which was trying to get in a similar kind of way, bring together all the different cultural resources of this very diverse and plural country that we have. That is what we came together in. And I had mentioned to her that during my different postings abroad, several of those postings were in Asian countries. So I started my career in the diplomatic service in China, and I was amazed at how much of India's, literary, religious heritage is actually all over China. My most memorable experience was in a monastery. This is 1974. I went to a Buddhist monastery in Canton, in Guangzhou, as it is known. And in that monastery, I heard a group of monks reciting some hymns from a Chinese text. And I could somehow make out that what they are reciting is some form of Sanskrit, because it didn't sound Chinese. And so when they finished, I went up to them and I said, "What were you reciting?" And said, "We don't know, but these are ancient texts which have come down to us. And for hundreds of years, people have been reciting this. So we are reciting this, but we don't know what it means. We just know that this is very sacred." So all over China, actually, you see a huge amount of material which was taken from India. A large number of Indian monks were going to China to preach, to translate, these Buddhist texts into Chinese. They are not very much known in India, but they are quite well known in China. You have heard the name of Kumarajiva, who was, of course, just a very famous scholar. Similarly, when I went to Japan on a posting, and I visited a place called Koyasan, which is a monastery town which is just outside Kyoto. And there, thanks to, we have a famous scholar called Raghuvir and then Lokesh Chandra. Thanks to their introduction, I was introduced to a chief priest of the main temple there in Koyasan, who then acted as my guide. And one of the places that he went to, he said it is never opened for anyone, except for very select people. But since you are a friend of Dr. Lokesh Chandra and Raghuvira, who had been his teacher, he took me inside. And these were all the manuscripts in Sanskrit, in other languages, which a Japanese monk called Kobo Daishi, he had brought from China, having studied in a place called Xi'an, with none other than some of the great scholars, Chinese scholars, who had studied in Nalanda and then came to China. And this is where you have texts which show how Kobo Daishi using the Sanskrit syllabary, actually came up with what is known now as the katakana. That is a phonetic, a script based on phonetic symbols. And of course, I mean, if you go to a place like Indonesia, the colors and echoes of India are everywhere. Finally, I ended up in Nepal, and I discovered not just in official collections, but mainly in private collections. There are such rare manuscripts which are part of, family heirlooms in a sense. Going back to where we started, so I said to her that there are huge number of these kind of manuscripts which are scattered all over the world. Then the colonial period, people came here, like the British, and took away a lot of lot of our manuscripts. So some were lost, some were taken away, some were used as study material by scholars coming from abroad. A lot of it, for example, is there in Tibetan. So we began a project, or we wanted to begin a project of starting to make a kind of an inventory of all these documents, all these manuscripts which are scattered all over the world. At least some people, I mean, we should at least have a knowledge of what is in collections abroad, and see then make it an open source kind of material for scholars. So that is how the idea began, but it has taken us a long time to get to the point where we have actually started doing it. And believe me, in about 3 years' time, you would be amazed at how much we have been able to actually get together. Amazing amount of material. So some of it you will see in the exhibition upstairs, which will give you an idea of what we have achieved. But there is so much more to do. My idea, and this is something that IIC shares, is that these kind of things, our heritage should not be sort of under closed doors, not something that is only the preserve of very accomplished scholars. There must be some way in which we are able to take this message out to the larger public, because frankly speaking, public awareness of what really our heritage is. We say we are very proud of ancient culture, but what really that culture is and what its significance is, I don't think many people understand. So the idea was not only to do this exercise, but also to make certain that we have a way of being able to take this out. And so part of the reason why we want to have this conference, and also importantly the exhibition, is to really give a public exposure to this very, very valuable and ancient heritage that we have. So in that context, I would like to once again thank particularly Professor Ramasubramaniam, who responded very enthusiastically to our proposal to have this project, and you have seen how passionate he is about what we are doing. We have also of course, very distinguished professor from Princeton, Professor Manjul Bhargav, who will be our keynote speaker. Professor Srinivas, who will be our valedictory speaker. Professor Chandrasekhar, scholar of Persian, and who has also very much helped us in really mapping the transmission of Indian knowledge systems to Central Asia, to Persia, and even beyond. I mean, the history, so I won't repeat it. We have also Dr. Alwar. Many of the manuscripts which you see in original palm leaf are there in the exhibition, and we are very, very thankful to him for collaborating with us. Something that was not mentioned before, but I would like to also acknowledge that while we have received the support of the Ministry of External Affairs, and this has been critical. So we are, unfortunately, Dr. Jaishankar could not come in the morning because he has to meet some VIP delegation, but he decided that, okay, I will come in the evening at least. So his support and the Ministry of External Affairs support has been critical in this respect. But we have also reached out to other possible sponsors and supporters, and I'm very happy to say that very recently there is a think tank headed by Mr. Anil Rajput, who I don't think is here, which is called Bharat Ki Soch. And it corresponds very much to the kind of project which we are doing, is to try and see how ancient Indian knowledge systems can be revived again and can become a base for much further research, in our contemporary context. So they are joining us in taking this project forward. And as it expands, I hope we'll get more such support. But this conference is crucial. This is probably the first time we have so many eminent mathematicians gathered together. I'm not aware of whether there has been this kind of an assemblage before, so we are very proud to be able to pay host to all of you. And we will need your support, because once you go back, if you can help us in locating some maybe manuscripts that you are aware of, which we can perhaps access, we can digitize and add to the inventory, that would be a great support for us. So with those words, thank you very much, and once again, warm welcome. You want to continue? No, yeah, you have tea first, yeah.
Thank you, sir, for your inspiring address. Please join us. Tea is served outside. We request you to reconvene at 11:15.
Beautifully captured. All the points.
अच्छा, अभी सुनाई दे रहा है? ठीक है.
So, so this is welcome to the keynote address, which we've all been looking forward to. Professor Ramasubramanian will chair, and Professor Manjul Bhargav. I don't think we need an introduction. I'll just run through the. Professor Manjul Bhargav is R. Brandon Fradd Professor of Mathematics at Princeton University. And in 2014, he was awarded the Fields Medal for developing powerful new methods in the geometry of numbers. His work spans algebraic number theory, algebraic geometry, and the history of mathematics. He's lectured extensively on the contributions of India to global mathematics. In 2023, he was appointed co-chairperson of India's National Syllabus and Teaching Learning Materials Committee. He received the Padma Bhushan in 2015 as a Fellow of the Royal Society of London and a member of the US National Academy of Sciences. He will be giving an overview of Bharatiya contributions to global mathematics.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that very kind introduction. It's a real honor to be at this conference on South Asia's manuscript heritage and mathematical contributions, and to be among such stalwarts in the field. I want to begin by thanking the India International Center for hosting this. Everyone involved here, Shri Srivastavji, Shri Shyamji, and of course, the organizers. On behalf of all us participants, we thank the organizers for putting this together, Sudha Gopalakrishnan-ji and Ram Subramaniam-ji and everyone involved. Thank you for inviting us to be here and for hosting this very important conference on understanding India's manuscript heritage, and in particular, mathematical manuscript heritage. I should say at the outset, I'm not one of the experts here compared to the stalwarts who are actually present at this conference. There are many great scholars here in this area, and I'm just a beginner in comparison, but nevertheless, what I want to talk about today is a survey and an introduction to the kinds of things that we will be hearing about in this conference. Hopefully it's a gentle introduction and a gentle preparation for the more detailed talks that will be occurring throughout this conference. So what I want to talk about is, well, we all know about we all talk about zero as being an important contribution of India to the world. But in fact, there are many, many important fundamental contributions that came from India in mathematics that unfortunately we don't learn about in school so much, because after colonial times, a lot of the names changed, a lot of the narratives changed in how history was presented. And so a lot of these things that are very fundamental, that everyone should know, that I feel everyone should know, are actually not known by the public. And so those are the kinds of things that I want to talk about today. I've actually given a version of this talk just twice before. One was online during COVID for the Ministry of Culture, and then once was at an international conference in IIT Gandhinagar. Both had very large audiences. I was amazed at the kind of response that the talk got the 2 times I gave it. And the most common message that I would get is, I had called the talk 10 things that everyone should know about India's contributions to mathematics. And there were requests, well, can you add also this? Can you make it 12? Can you make it 15? So the area is very, very vast. I'll stick to the 10 that I chose in this lecture, but I'll mention a few more of the requests that have come in, and some of them will actually be addressed during this conference. But the area is vast. We only have an hour, so I'll stick to maybe 10 main things, and I'll mention a few more that everyone should know. And eventually, I hope to compile all these together and maybe make a booklet that can be handed out. Okay, so I'll begin with just what I was speaking about, the current reality. Even after 75 years of independence, these fundamental things that we all learn in school about mathematics, we never actually learn the proper history. And these are things that are now being corrected in textbooks, long last. But due to propagation of colonial era textbooks and writings, the Indian roots of mathematics have remained largely unknown to the general public. And so unfortunately, many of India's fundamental contributions to mathematics have not generally been covered in school textbooks and in the public discourse. I personally was lucky, even though I grew up mostly in the United States and a little bit in Jaipur, I was lucky to have learned a lot about the mathematics of India as a child because my grandfather, my Nanaji, was a Sanskrit scholar. And so much of what I learned about mathematics growing up was through what he taught me about the rhythms of Sanskrit poetry and about the many works that were on his shelf. So my grandfather and my mother had very deep interests in the connections between language and mathematics, and between literature and mathematics. And so I got to learn a lot of these things growing up, and I learned mathematics in large part through things that my grandfather and my mother taught me through ancient Indian literature. And then I was unsuitably confused when I went to school, both in the US and in India. Surprisingly, also, when I went to school in India, I was surprised similarly to find different names for many of the fundamental things that I learned from ancient Indian sources. Fundamental mathematical objects and mathematical theorems had different names, different narratives when we learned about them in school. And so I want to give a sense of some of these fundamental discoveries that originated in India that I believe everyone should know. So there's one contribution, as I said, that everyone knows about, which is zero. I was talking to ambassador here. There was a large zero project that got a lot of attention in the world about how zero originated in India, and that's something that is well known in India. So a contribution that everyone does know is that of zero. Well, at least they know something about zero happened in India. What exactly that means that zero originated in India is, of course, not as well known. We just say that zero originated in India, but what does that actually mean? It means a lot of things. It means zero as a concept, the fact that we can talk about nothingness as being something, the fact that we have a symbol for zero to notate the concept of nothingness, and that we use zero as a placeholder, as a place value in the way we write numerals today. These are the meanings of zero that all really originated in India. just one humorous thing that that maybe a lot of you have seen. We've all seen the T-shirt that many Indians proudly wear, saying India's contribution to mathematics is 0. And some of the T-shirts also have a subtitle. We always knew we were good for nothing. So while the statement about 0 coming from India is true when interpreted correctly, right, as a concept, as a symbol, as a digit in the way we write numerals today, it's only one of a very large number of fundamental contributions to mathematics coming from India. So in that sense, India's contributions to mathematics are also much greater than 0, in addition to being 0. So while the contribution of 0 to mathematics is recognized and taught in schools around the world these days, most of the other major contributions of India usually go completely unmentioned, even in schools in India. And hopefully that will be changing over the next few years. So I'll talk about some of the fundamental discoveries that were made in India that we all should know, and indeed that I feel should be taught in school and should be part of the public discourse. But first I'll show you the shirt, in case you haven't seen it before. There it is. Okay, so I'll give here's a summary of 10 non-zero Indian contributions to mathematics that everyone should know. Well, the 0th one is 0, but the others are the non-zero contributions. First, there's the Indian numeral system that we all use to write numbers today around the world. There's the Bodhayana Pythagoras theorem, that's usually still called just the Pythagoras theorem in India. The mathematics of language. A lot of great contributions to mathematics were made in India because of the scientific approach to language that Painini and other grammarians used to understand and model language. Trigonometry has some of its most fundamental origins in India. Negative numbers. We all naturally come up with positive numbers. Every culture naturally comes up with positive numbers, but the depth that is needed to think, well, negative numbers should also be numbers, in addition to 0, was a deep contribution that also originated in India. The quadratic equation we all learn in school, how to solve the quadratic equation. The first general statement of the formula for the solution to the quadratic equation was made in India. Binomial coefficients, how to count subsets of a large set of objects, how to count them, leads to the notion of binomial coefficients, which are very fundamental in mathematics today. They also originated in India. The Virahanka-Fibonacci sequence. This is often still called just the Fibonacci sequence in India, though it was discovered well before Fibonacci and written about by many authors in India prior to Fibonacci. Error detecting and correcting codes to preserve manuscripts before they were written down, how they were passed on from generation to generation without error. Those used error detecting and correcting codes. And the number 10 on this list that I want to talk about is the first exact formula for pi. We all learned that pi is approximately 3.14, or it's approximately 22/7. But neither of those is actually an accurate, exact formula for pi. Better and better approximations were found in many cultures over the years, better and better approximations. But the first exact formula that gives you pi on the nose originated in India. And that's something also that's not generally known in the public discourse, but should be. There is an exact formula for pi, and it was first found in India. So I'll let you look at that for a second, and then I'll say a little bit about each of these 10. And then I'll talk about some of the requests for what else should have been what else should have made the top 10 list. Okay, so maybe I'll start first with 0, though, where everything begins. So the way we write our numerals today, the Indian or the Hindu numeral system, comes from India. And that's something most of us are familiar with, but this is perhaps India's greatest contribution to daily life. I mean, you can't imagine a moment when you're not looking at your watch and seeing Indian numerals, or when you're planning your day, and just throughout the day, you can't avoid using these numerals. It's so much a part of everyone's daily life in the world, and it's perhaps India's greatest invention and greatest contribution to daily life. So the ingenuity, this is something maybe we don't always think about, but what makes the Indian number system so incredibly useful? Why has it become adapted and adopted around the world? The ingenuity of the Indian number system is that any number, however large or even however small, can be written using just 10 symbols, namely 1 through 9 and the digit 0. That's the ingenuity of this system of writing numerals. That only 10 symbols allow you to write any number in the world, however big. And it's a vast improvement over other numeral systems that existed in other parts of the world, most notably the Roman numerals, which were used very extensively for centuries in Europe. It's a vast improvement over other numeral writing systems, because in those numeral systems, like the Roman numeral system, each time you got to a large enough number, you needed to introduce a new symbol. And when you reached 500, okay, you introduce a new symbol. And you reach 1,000, it's taking too long to write using the symbols you have, you introduce a new symbol. And then eventually when you run out of symbols, you run out of numbers that you can write down. And so the Indian number system really allowed one to talk about arbitrarily large numbers for the first time. And that's why in Indian literature you see a fascination with very, very large numbers. So even starting with the Yajurveda, huge numbers are given names, and they're named using powers of 10, and that is the basis of the way we write our numerals today. So the fact that you can write any number, however large, just using 10 symbols is really what made the world change to the Indian way of writing numerals. So this remarkable Indian system of numeration, which we use today to write any number with only these 10 digits, only finitely many symbols, is truly what's made all modern science and technological innovations possible. So that's why I say this, I think, is the greatest, one of the greatest inventions of all time that really changed the world. And we all take it for granted today because we use it every day. It's like second nature to us. But just imagining the way numbers were written in other parts of the world, you can see how much life has changed by adopting this way of writing numerals. It's not so obvious, though. Now that we use it every day, we take it for granted. But it is one of the deepest and most ingenious inventions. The first surviving reference in which the Indian system of numeration was used is the Bakshali manuscript, which, based on various literary and other considerations, seems to have written about the year 200 to 400. And there, Indian numerals, essentially the way we use them today, are written, but where the 0 was written as a dot. So it wasn't sort of fully recognized as a number, it was like a placeholder, but it was there. It was a symbol for 0, and many works of literature around that time refer to the 0 symbol as the shunya bindu. So it was a bindu, so it wasn't written quite as large as the other digits. So it didn't quite reach the ranking of other digits. It was a digit, but it was written as a dot. And then over time, that dot enlarged to become to attain equal standing with all other numerals. When one uses only the two symbols 0 and 1, instead of the 10, 0, 1, 2, all the way up to 9, instead of those 10 symbols, this is called the binary system. You can write arbitrarily large numbers just using 0 and 1, using the same idea. And in fact, that idea was already there in Pingal's Chanda Shastra around 300 BC. And this is now the basis of all computer computation. So the Indian numeral system can be written with any number of digits. There's nothing so special about 10. Indians chose 10 most likely because we have 10 fingers and it makes it easy to count using one's hands. But if you use only two symbols, that's a perfectly valid system, and that was already there in 300 BC to enumerate Sanskrit meters. of poetry. So Sanskrit meters have short and long syllables, and if you think of them as 0 and 1, then you can enumerate all meters by thinking in the binary system. And that was already there in 300 BC. So these ideas, you can see, even though we see the way we write numerals today only in the year, say, 300, the ideas were already there, coming from linguistic works before the Bakshali manuscript. And then Aryabhatta is the first person who really used these numerals to do computations and sort of showed the world how much easier it becomes to compute things if you compute using Indian numerals. So until then, 0 was being used as a placeholder in the way we write numerals, often being written just as a dot. But the algebraic properties of the number 0 as a number in its own right, not just as a placeholder with using a dot in our number system. The fact that 0 is actually a number, just like any number, that was first formalized in Brahmagupta's Brahmaspurta Siddhant in the year 628. There, Brahmagupta wrote the rules of 0. 0 plus any number is the same number. 0 times any number is 0. The fact that you can do arithmetic operations with 0, just like you do with the positive numbers, was first formalized and written about by Brahmagupta. And that's what motivated him to then extend it even further and go into the negative numbers. And that completely changed mathematics. The fact that it's not just the positive numbers that are numbers, but 0 and the negative numbers are also numbers, and together they form a ring in which you can do computations. That totally changed mathematics, and that all originated with 0 and Brahmagupta's approach. The Hindu number system was transmitted to the Arab world in around the year 800, so it had already been in India for several hundred years before it finally moved into the Arab world. And in the Arab world, it was popularized by the great Persian mathematician Al-Khwarizmi. He wrote this famous book on the calculation with Hindu numerals in the year 825, and also by the great Arab philosopher Al-Kindi, who wrote on the use of Hindu numerals. So the Arabs and the great Arab scholars referred to these numerals as the Hindu numerals. And then from the Arab world, a few hundred years later, this system of writing numerals was transmitted to Europe around the year 1100. And because the Europeans learned these numerals from the Arabs, they called it the Arabic numeral system, while the Arabs called it Hindasa, or the Hindu numerals. And then during colonial times, then of course, India also started calling them the Arabic numerals, even though the numbers originated in India. And even school textbooks, you'll see, in India used to write them as Arabic numerals, whereas the Arabs were calling them Hindu numerals, where they learned them. So these kinds of things are finally being corrected in textbooks, which is exciting. In most places around the world, it's been corrected. India is always the last to adapt, but now, India is also finally calling them by the correct historical name, Indian numerals or Hindu numerals. Okay, so that's a brief history of 0 in the Indian number system. There's a lot more to say, but I just wanted to start with that. Okay, so number 1 on the list that I had included was the Bodhayana-Pythagoras theorem. So we've all seen this theorem. If you have a right triangle and you make squares on all 3 sides, the sum of the areas of the 2 smaller squares is the area of the larger square. And so this is what we often used to learn in school as the Pythagorean theorem. So the famous theorem that c squared is a squared plus b squared was known to many cultures, even prior to Pythagoras. There's no real good reason why it's called the Pythagorean theorem. In fact, there's no evidence at all that Pythagoras or the Pythagoreans had a proof of the theorem. Many cultures were aware of the existence of a theorem like this. But the first place that we know of where the theorem is explicitly stated for a general triangle, not just an isosceles triangle or for particular triangles, but for a general right triangle, in the way we describe it in modern mathematics, that way it was first stated in Bodhayana's Shulba Sutra, and around the year 800 BC. It's described in 2 verses, or 2 sutras in the Shulba Sutra. One is 1.45, where it says, a rope stretched along the diagonal produces an area which the vertical and horizontal sides make together. It's exactly exactly the way we describe the theorem today. And it's described in a further sutra, in 1.48, to combine different squares, mark out the rectangle from the larger with a side of the smaller. The diagonal of this rectangle is a side of the sum. That's written a little more cryptically, because the statement has already been made in 1.45. 1.48, if you make the diagram the way it's described, what comes out is basically a proof of the theorem, a geometric description of a proof of the theorem. And so that's why it seems very natural that, and this is the first place that this was ever written in a general way like this. And so that's why it's very natural to call this Bodhayana's theorem, or the Bodhayana-Pythagoras theorem. But this theorem also has its origins in India. Okay, so that's the Bodhayana-Pythagoras theorem. After Bodhayana, who was the first person to state it and also describe a geometric proof. One of my personal favorite contributions of India to mathematics is that of Painini and the mathematics of language. So Painini is the first person to use a generative grammar to describe a language. So a generative grammar is a system of rules that generates exactly those combinations of sounds or letters or words that form valid phrases or sentences in a given language. Valid words or phrases or sentences in a given language. So that's what a generative grammar is. It's a very important concept in computer science. But its origins are in the work of Painini, who used a generative grammar in his Ashtadhyayi to describe all valid constructions in the language of Sanskrit. And so the notion of generative grammar forms an important concept in modern linguistics and modern computer science. But the concept of a large-scale generative grammar was first discovered by Painini, who constructed a monumental generative grammar with algebraic rules that governed every aspect of the Sanskrit language. And we've never seen anything like that before or since. And this was in his monumental Ashtadhyayi, which contains about 4,000 sutras over 8 parts that lay down a generative grammar for the entire language of Sanskrit. It's a testament to both the scientific nature of the Sanskrit language and also the ingenuity of Painini to think of this concept of generative grammar to just describe the entire language. And even today, one of the best ways to learn Sanskrit is to learn the sutras of Painini, and then you just recall them and you can speak Sanskrit and write Sanskrit absolutely correctly. It's never been done for any other natural language. But that concept of generative grammar really changed the way we think about language, linguistics, and of course theoretical computer science. And for this reason, Painini is often called the father of linguistics and the early founder of theoretical computer science. And this is a vast area of study. I only get a few minutes to talk about it, but you can just imagine the importance of this contribution. Maybe I'll talk a little bit about one aspect of the Ashtadhyayi, just as a microcosm of what the entire book entails. Phonetics is one aspect of language that Painini also described in a deeply algebraic and scientific way. The phonetics of Sanskrit, and indeed most Indian languages as a result, is incredibly mathematical. And it's something we don't think about, it's something we don't necessarily learn in school. We learn English together with Hindi, together with Sanskrit, as if they're all similar as languages. But there are some differences in Indian languages that are not often pointed out in the way we make sounds in these languages. And Painini and his predecessors' description of the phonetic structure of Indian languages is just incredibly striking to a mathematician when we're reading this. It's just unbelievable the way our alphabet is described, and the sounds that we make in Indian languages are described. So, and here's basically the description. There's a lot more to it. In simple terms, Panini describes that each phoneme is just a unit of sound. Each phoneme is represented by a grapheme, which is just the character that represents that sound. Each phoneme, and equivalently grapheme, has two independent parameters by which it is completely characterized. This is the content of Panini's description of pronunciation. What are these two parameters that you need to specify to make a sound? One is the organ of pronunciation. Where is the sound originating? From the throat all the way to the lips. There are areas of the mouth that make the sound. So you have to specify where that sound is coming from. That's the organ of pronunciation. And then there's the modulation, the quality of the sound that you make from that location. So these are the two parameters, the organ of pronunciation and the modulation. And if you specify both of these, then you specify the sound in Sanskrit, or any Indian language for that matter. So there are 5 organs of pronunciation. It starts with the throat, then goes to the palate, then the roof of the mouth, then the teeth, and then the lips. So these are called gutturals, palatals, cerebrals or retroflexes, dentals, the ones that use the teeth, and then the labials, the ones that use the lips. Those are the 5 organs by which we make sounds in Indian languages. And then for each of them, there are 11 qualities of modulation that are described in these ancient Indian works, including in Panini's Ashtadhyayi. So they're called hard unaspirated, hard aspirated, soft aspirated, nasal, semivowel, sibilant, simple vowel, long vowel, gurna vowel, and vriddhi vowel. And so if you specify which of these 5 organs of speech you want to use, and you specify how you want to modulate from that location, you will specify the sound of the Sanskrit language that you want to say. So again, this takes a long time to explain if it's only one of 10 topics. But if these first 5, hard unaspirated, soft unaspirated, soft aspirated, and nasal, these are the way the first 5 vargas that we learn, ka, kha, ga, gha, nga. They're all coming from the throat with those 5 modulations, ending with the nasal, nga, right? Ja, cha, ja, ja, nya. Tar, tar, dar, tar, na. Right, so those are coming, and then it ends with ba, pa, ba, bha, ma, which are using the lips and using those 5 qualities of modulation. So this ends up giving a table of all the sounds, and this is how we basically learn the alphabet. And when people from outside come to India and are learning the alphabets, they're like, oh my gosh, you actually learn it this way? It's totally arranged in a mathematical way. You start at the throat, you work your way to the lips, and you go through these 5 kinds of modulation. And when you do the vowels, again, you go from the gutturals all the way to the labials. And so naturally arises this table, and this is basically the way we learn our alphabets. So for example, if you want to know, say you want to make a labial sound, which is using the lips, and you want to make it nasal, okay, so that's the labial nasal, you end up here. And so the labial nasal sound is ma, right? Ma uses the lips, and it's nasal, ma. So that all the sounds in Sanskrit and all Indian languages are described that way. And you can compare that with English. Consider the English alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. What is the order there? The vowels are mixed with consonants, they're coming from random places, right? So this is a really incredible contribution to the understanding of phonetics, which happened way back in 500 BC. And when European linguists first discovered these descriptions of pronunciation, it created a revolution in the area of linguistics in Europe when this way of classifying sounds was first read about by European linguists. This connection of mathematics and language is one of the great contributions of India to both mathematics and linguistics. Okay, so I'll move on a little bit to the story of trigonometry. Trigonometry also has its most fundamental origins in India. In particular, the sine function and the cosine function, which are the basis for trigonometry, were first introduced in India. So the sine function has its origins in the work of Aryabhatta, in his Aryabhatiya. And the way the sine function is defined today first occurs in the Aryabhatiya. In terms of lengths of chords, that description, that modern description, first occurs in the Aryabhatiya. So both the functions sine and cosine can be traced to the functions jya and koti jya, as introduced by Aryabhatta in the year 499 in his Aryabhatiya. So these were his notions of sine and cosine. Now, where did the names sine and cosine come from? That just tracing that is very interesting, because it used to be jya and koti jya. How did that change to sine and cosine? So the word jya, which means half, it was referring to a half chord, was transliterated from Sanskrit to Arabic as jibba. Okay, so when this word moved from India into the Arab world, it changed a little bit. Jya became jibba, and then when Robert of Chester was translating the Arab works on trigonometry, which in turn came from India into Latin, he saw this word jibba and he thought it's jaib, which refers to the bosom. And so he said, okay, well, if I'm going to translate jibba was just meant to be a copy of jya. But when Robert of Chester saw it, he thought, oh, they're referring to bosom, because jaib means bosom in Arabic. And so the Latin word sinus for bosom was what he used for this half-chord sine function. So that's where sinus comes from. It comes from the misinterpretation of the transliteration of jya into Arabic. And so that sinus then became sine. So that's the origin of why we now call it sine. But Aryabhatta's modern definitions of what are now known as the sine and cosine functions are why he's often called the father of trigonometry, because these are the two fundamental functions of trigonometry. And Aryabhatta used these two functions extensively in his astronomical calculations. So he not only introduced these functions, he made the first extensive tables of them and used them to do extensive, important computations in mathematics and astronomy. And so that's why he's the father of modern trigonometry. Okay, but these are the Indian origins of trigonometry. I already mentioned that Brahmagupta was the first to talk about negative numbers, so I won't say too much more. But Brahmagupta talked about debts and fortunes and treated them, both debts and fortunes, equally as numbers. That was really the first time where this was formalized and extensively used to solve problems. So the algebraic properties of negative numbers, in addition to zero, were first formulated and described in his Brahmasputra Siddhanta in the year 628. Before then, people really thought of just the positive numbers as being numbers, and then you can talk about taking away a positive number, and you can talk about debts, but are those numbers just like positive numbers? That's the first time that was described, was in the Brahmasputra Siddhanta. And Brahmagupta described the rules that zero and negative numbers follow when arithmetic operations are applied. So, for example, a negative number times a negative number is a positive number. These general principles and rules for all numbers, including zero and negative numbers, were first described in Brahmagupta. And so when one takes the positive numbers together with zero and the negative numbers, and using Brahmagupta's rules of addition, subtraction, and multiplication, in modern terminology, that was the first example, the first formulation of what's now called a ring, which is now really the basis of all modern algebra. The fact that, see, when you only have the positive numbers, they're not closed. What does closed mean? If you take two positive numbers and you subtract them, you're not a number anymore if you're only considering positive numbers as numbers. So by throwing in zero and the negative numbers, we obtain a system of numbers that's closed under addition and multiplication and subtraction. And that's what in modern terminology is called a ring. And that closure property is very important to the development of modern algebra. So Brahmagupta discovered a system of numbers that was closed under all the fundamental arithmetic operations. And that was a very, very important conceptual step in the development of modern algebra, and also just in everyday life. It's very, very important to recognize zero and negative numbers as actual numbers to do computations. So the introduction of zero and then the negative numbers to our system of numerals is indeed one of the greatest leaps forward in the history of mathematics. And that again was made by Brahmagupta and other mathematicians before and after him, but Brahmagupta really codified it in a way on which one could build the modern theory of algebra. Okay, so that's the negative numbers and their origins in India from around the year 628. Brahmagupta did a lot. The first statement of the solution to the quadratic equation also originates in his work. So we all learned this formula in school when we're solving quadratic equations. I don't know how many remember it after the exams go by, but we all use this formula in school to solve quadratic equations. And while solutions had been obtained for quadratic equations and for specific types of quadratic equations in Mesopotamia and in Greece and in Egypt, the first explicit statement of these two solutions that I wrote here, the general quadratic formula that we all learned, that was first, just for a general quadratic equation, a general statement of the solution was first given by Brahmagupta, again in 628 in his Brahmasputra Siddhant. And there's his statement of the quadratic formula. Of course, he was writing in verse, but you can see that his description, to the negative of the constant coefficient multiplied by 4 times, right, here it is, 4 times the coefficient of the square, add the square of the coefficient of the middle term, the square root of this minus the coefficient of the middle term, being divided by twice the coefficient of the square, is the value. So there it is, just in words, the quadratic formula that we all learned in school to solve any general quadratic equation in one variable. That general statement was first given in India and first used in India in this form. I should mention that Brahmagupta, together with Bhaskara, also gave a full solution in integers to what's called the Brahmagupta-Pell equation, which is a quadratic equation of this form: x squared minus ny squared equals plus or minus 1. So n is fixed here, and x and y are the variables, and we're trying to find the solutions. This is called the Brahmagupta-Pell equation. It's of great modern importance. It's something that one only learns in undergraduate mathematics rather than in school-level mathematics. But this is one of those early contributions related to the quadratic formula, but a great advance over the quadratic formula that also originated in the work of Brahmagupta and Bhaskara, and has very important modern implications for understanding units in algebraic extensions of number fields. Okay, so that's Brahmagupta's work on quadratic equations. So, as I was telling you about earlier, the mathematics of language in India has been very, very deep, and lots of linguists made some of the greatest mathematical contributions, like Panini. So, like with many modern Indian languages, Sanskrit and Prakrit poetry, when one reads those poems in these Indian languages, Malayalam also, Marathi also, Telugu also, when one reads poetry in these Indian languages, the syllables that one says are classified as either long or short. In many languages, we have the notion of stressed and unstressed syllable when we say poetry, when we pronounce poetry. But Sanskrit and Prakrit and Telugu and Marathi, Malayalam, they take this even further. They not only have a notion of stressed and unstressed when they say poetry, but the stressed syllables are actually longer in duration when you pronounce them than the short syllables. And in a very mathematical way, when pronounced in Sanskrit, a short syllable lasts 1 beat of time, and a long syllable lasts 2 beats of time. In other words, a long syllable takes exactly twice as long to pronounce as a short syllable. And you can imagine with that setup, it gives rise to many mathematical questions that the ancients considered in great detail. So one question that arose for ancient poets was, okay, well, if every syllable is either long or short, and a long syllable has 2 beats and a short syllable has 1 beat, how many ways, if you're a poet and you have 8 beats of poetry left in your stanza, how many ways can you fill in those 8 beats with longs and shorts, where a long takes 2 beats and a short takes 1 beat? So how many rhythms or meters can one construct of exactly, say, 8 beats, consisting of short and long syllables, where short is 1 beat and a long is 2 beats? So there are many ways you can do that, right? You can go long, 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 long. That's 8 beats, right? Because each long is 2. Or you could go short, 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 short. That's also 8 beats, but you can do various things in between. So poets in ancient India came up with a very ingenious solution to obtaining an answer to this question, which is now part of a huge mathematical and artistic theory. So other things you could do in between would be like short, long, long, short, long, 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 short, short, long, right? So all these combinations are there. How many total combinations are there? And the first solution to this, an answer to this problem was given by Virahanka. So Virahanka's elegant solution around the year 700 was, so he writes this in poetry, but the translation is that, well, write down the numbers 1 and 2, okay? And then each subsequent number that you write down should be obtained by summing up, adding up the previous 2 numbers that you wrote down. And just keep doing that, and that will be the answer, he says. So he says the nth number that you then write down will give the number of rhythms having n beats. So here we write down the numbers 1 and 2 first, and now each subsequent number that you write down should be the sum of the previous 2 that you write down. So next number should be the sum of 1 and 2, which is 3. The next one should be sum of 2 and 3, which is 5. The next should be the sum of the last 2 you wrote down, 3 and 5, which is 8. 5 and 8 is 13. 8 and 13 is 21. 13 plus 21 is 34. 21 plus 34 is 55, and so on. And what is the 8th number that you wrote down? Well, that's here in this box. It's 34. And so the answer to the previous question, how many rhythms are there consisting of longs and shorts having 8 beats? The answer is 34. This is the 8th number in that sequence. And so these are called the Virahanka numbers. But of course in India these numbers are known as the Fibonacci numbers, after the Italian mathematician who studied them 500 years later. So, in fact, Fibonacci was not, he wasn't the first person to write about these numbers, but he wasn't either the second or the third. Because after Virahanka, these numbers were studied further by Gopala a few hundred years later, and then by Hemachandra. Again, in the context of poetry, these were all poets and linguists and philosophers who were making great contributions to mathematics. So all these authors in India wrote about the Virahanka numbers well before Fibonacci wrote about them. But there's a deeper lesson here, which is it's not just a historical fact that these numbers came way earlier in India. The way they came up in India is so much more interesting than the way they're taught now as Fibonacci numbers. If you remember how Fibonacci numbers were taught in Indian textbooks, it's a story of how rabbits multiply. And they start with 2 rabbits who are brother and sister, and then there are these incestuous stories about how they're and it has nothing to do with reality. It's just a made-up story. Whereas here, these numbers were actually used by drummers, by poets, to compute the number of possibilities they had in writing poetry in a certain meter. I've spent a lot of time in the drumming traditions of India. I play tabla, and one thing that we all learn to practice is if you have a piece that's conveying this dichotomy between long and short, we learn how to enumerate all combinations of long and short, of 8 beats, of 10 beats, of 12 beats. We learn how to enumerate all of them because when we're improvising on the stage, one needs to know what repertoire one has from which to improvise. And so we actually learn these from the Sanskrit and Prakrit poetry tradition came the drumming tradition. And in drumming, we actually, there's a practical applications for understanding these sets of rhythms. And so this beautiful artistic origin of these numbers is such a nice way of learning about these numbers compared to the artificial story about rabbits. And it's something that in school during colonial times, this origin was forgotten and was replaced by less natural later historical truths. So why should we learn numbers this way? First of all, well, it's the truth. We should learn history accurately. But also, it's a better way of thinking about these numbers, or at least an alternative way of thinking about these numbers, which actually makes it easier to understand them, which has practical applications to art. And it also illustrates this fine line between science and art, that this sequence is one of the most important throughout mathematics. There's an entire journal dedicated to these numbers called the Fibonacci Quarterly. So there's an entire journal dedicated to these numbers. That's how important they are, and yet their origin was in art, in poetry. I mean, isn't that beautiful? It's something that we must bring back to school and to public discourse. What a beautiful story of the origins of mathematics coming from art and from poetry. More examples of fundamental contributions that came from poetry, from Pingala, Madhava, and others who studied the mathematics behind meter and rhythm. So a related question is, how many meters are there of 6 syllables where you have 3 short syllables and 5 long syllables? Laghus and gurus. If you specify how many laghus and how many gurus you have, how many meters are there? So this general question of, if you specify how many short syllables you want and how many long syllables you want, how many meters are there? This was also answered already by Pingala in 300 BC, but many others wrote about it later. Oh, sorry for the typo here. Varaha Mihir, Virahanka, Hadayodh all wrote about these numbers. And that led to the discovery of what is called Pascal's triangle, or Pingala's Meru Prastar. Of course, Pascal was the year 1500, so in India we call it Pascal's triangle, but it was discovered 2,000 years earlier by Pingala, called Pingala's Meru Prastar. It's an infinite mountain of numbers in which the entries are the binomial coefficients, and those binomial coefficients give the answer in general to this question of how many rhythms you can make having a specified number of short syllables and a specified number of long syllables. These are some of the most fundamental objects in combinatorial mathematics, and they were discovered, again, in the context of linguistics and poetry. A beautiful story, one that has been forgotten and been replaced with stories that came 2,000 years later. But the origins of this were in art and in linguistics. Binomial coefficients now play an extremely important role throughout probability, combinatorics, number theory, and more, but they were discovered and written about, and how to compute with them. They were just 2,000 years ago almost in the works of Pingala and later grammarians and poets. And in the year 850, the mathematician Mahavir gave a direct formula for all binomial coefficients, namely that if you choose k things from n, the number of ways of doing that is this formula here, n factorial divided by k factorial times n minus k factorial, which is now one of the most fundamental formulas that we use every day as mathematicians. This is something I hadn't learned as a child. I learned only when I later in college, and I was shocked to see that we don't learn this in India, but I learned this at Harvard in my combinatorics class. So in India, Pingala's Meru Prastar, as I said, is called Pascal's triangle, after the French mathematician Pascal, who lived 1,800 years later. But we should go back to these names. Meru Prastar is, again, a very beautiful name, the extension of the mountain Meru. And what a beautiful, right? So Meru is like this mountain of jewels, and Prastar means this extension of this mountain, and the jewels are the numbers. I mean, what a beautiful way of thinking about this very, very important set of numbers. Pingala's Meru Prastar has its origins in India as well. There's a lot more to say about the kinds of mathematical contributions that Pingala made through his study of poetry. I mentioned the binary system originating in Pingala, the Meru Prastar, binomial coefficients originating in Pingala. the desire to maintain integrity of metrical compositions when they were passed down orally from generation to generation led Pingala and others of the time to develop error-detecting and error-correcting mechanisms, such as this famous word that we all drummers and poets learn, Yamata Rajabhana Salaga. These various kinds of codes that were developed to make sure that when poetry was passed on from generation to generation, or literature was passed on from generation to generation, because it was an oral literature, it was very important to maintain its integrity. And so various methods of making sure that things didn't change when it was transmitted to the next generation. There were very sophisticated error-correcting code mechanisms that were developed. These are the first deep examples of error-correcting and detecting codes. And they enabled the oral preservation of compositions for centuries without any errors. It's something that's absolutely remarkable. You've probably all played this game called Telephone, where you say a phrase, you sit in a circle and you whisper a phrase to the next person, it goes around the circle, and by the time it comes back, it's completely unrecognizable. Chinese whispers, it's also called, yeah. In the US, we often call it the game Telephone. And it's just, you've seen how much just a slight error multiplies as you go around. So you can imagine after 30 generations how much the original poetry of Sanskrit might have changed, right? Or of other languages might have changed. But those things were preserved with great integrity because of the sophisticated error correcting and detecting mechanisms that were developed. I wish I could talk about that in more detail. I give 2-hour-long talks about this topic because they just, some incredibly deep mathematics was used to carry this out. But I just wanted to mention error detecting and correcting codes. The first real sophisticated examples, again, originated in India because of the need to transmit literature and poetry orally without errors. Okay, so the last example I'll talk about is Madhava's exact formula for pi. So this is also something that we all should definitely learn in school because it's never really taught clearly. That pi is not 3.14 and pi is not 22/7. Those are just approximations. And over thousands of years, mathematicians from many cultures, because pi is such a fundamental constant that every culture will eventually stumble upon the importance of pi. But Archimedes, Aryabhata, and Zhuangzi, and others gave increasingly accurate estimates for this all-important, irrational, transcendental constant, pi. Pi is what you get when you take a circle, right, and you measure the distance, the length of this. If you measure the length of a circle, and you divide it by the length across, called the diameter. If you just do that division on any circle, right? You take any circle, you take the circumference, in other words, the length of the circle, and you divide it by the diameter, which is the distance across the circle. That will always be exactly pi, which is approximately 3.14. That's what pi is. And no one for centuries had ever made an exact formula for it. But they found increasingly good approximations, 3, then 3.1, 3.14. But this is what it is. Well, even this is only an approximation. 3.14, 592653589 9793, and so on. This is another favorite pastime of mathematicians is memorizing as many digits as possible. So I can say all these from memory. Like many mathematicians. But the first exact formula for pi was given by Madhava. So we've had increasingly better approximations over the years, but the first exact formula for pi was given by Madhava in the year 1400. There is no closed form formula for pi because it doesn't satisfy any algebraic equation. Okay. But Madhava realized that you could express it as an infinite series, exactly. And this is Madhava's formula for pi. It's absolutely beautiful. So it says that pi is 4 times this series. 1 minus a third, plus a fifth, minus a seventh, plus a ninth, minus an 11th, plus a 13th. If you do this forever and multiply it by 4, you get exactly pi. You get exactly 3.141596 going on forever. And this is the first exact formula for pi ever developed. And it's perhaps the simplest and most beautiful exact formula for pi in history, and it's the first one that was discovered, and it was discovered by Madhava. this fact already is very interesting and something that everyone should know, but the more important thing, I mean, Madhava found this formula in a much greater context. It was discovered by Madhava in the context of his theory of infinite series, the notions of infinitesimals that were developed by him and his school, the Kerala School of Mathematics, and this indeed laid the foundations of calculus that would be discovered by him and his school over the coming centuries. And so these really, this first exact formula for pi actually lies at the foundations of calculus. We often learn only the European history of calculus, which started later, but the seeds of calculus and a rigorous proof of formulas involving infinite series first occurred in the Kerala School of Mathematics, starting with Madhava. And of course, there are great experts in the audience on this history, and that you'll hopefully will hear about during this conference. But the seeds of calculus, we're very grateful to the scholars in the audience who finally brought forth this correct history of calculus to the world, because many of these important works were not translated until very recently, including in works of Professor Srinivas and Professor Sriram and Professor Ram Subramaniam and others. So that's a very great service that's being done for the history of Indian mathematics. But this is one of those great things that came out from that Kerala School of Mathematics as the first exact formula for pi, this fundamental constant that we all learn about in school but never learn that those are only approximations that we're learning. There's an exact formula too, and that was discovered in India, and it's the basis for a whole area of mathematics, calculus, and analysis that's now foundational for mathematics. Okay, so these are the 10 non-zero contributions of mathematics, and the contribution of zero I got to talk about a little bit. I hope that you'll take all these things with you and spread the word, and that will bring it to our schools and to the public discourse. And maybe I'll just end by mentioning the vast number of emails I got about what else should make the top 10 list, because as I said, an hour is not enough to really say is not nearly enough to say everything about the vast number of contributions and fundamental contributions of India to mathematics. Fractions is something that should probably have made the top 10. The way we write fractions today, for example, half we write as 1 on top and a 2 underneath, that originated in India. We first see the use of computations with fractions in the Bakshali manuscript, and then again, from the Bakshali manuscript all the way to Brahmagupta, they were extensively used for calculations. And then Brahmagupta again codified them, gave the rules for addition and multiplication in a way that we teach it in modern mathematics. The origin of fractions and how to use them and how to write them originates in India as well. So just think of the fundamental contributions to just writing numbers: zero, negative numbers, fractions. So fundamental to modern mathematics, all really originated in India. Rule of 3 is something that occurs. This was highly requested to make the top 10. If you have a rule about proportions, x is to y as a is to b, and you know 3 of them, how do you determine the 4th? That's the rule of 3 that was first extensively written about in India by many authors. Mathematical games are some of the most fundamental games that launched their own mathematical theories originated in India. Chess, of course, has its origins in India. Knights' tours, which is based on chess, but it leads to important combinatorial problems, were extensively studied in India and are still, a lot of those algorithms are still used today to solve certain combinatorial problems. Magic squares have a very, very extensive history in India. At the time, these were all games, but magic squares have now had applications to coding theory and encryption. So magic squares, a lot of this often happens in mathematics. You do things for recreation, and then you find later that they have important applications. That almost always happens. And this happened with many of the games that Indians considered of a mathematical nature over thousands of years. Okay, there are many more. These were some of the top requests. I thought I'd mention them. And I'll stop there. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
so much, Professor Bhargav, for a lecture that Keynote, whose depth of erudition is only matched by its pellucid clarity and your ability to convey the beauty of these words. I think we'll probably, may I request Professor Ramasubramanian to honor our speaker with.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
So may I invite our next speakers, Professor Hemish.
Should we stay up here? Another?